Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Happy 2023, everybody. I think I said that last week, but if I didn't, I'll say it this time, and I mean it. And a happy Sunday to everybody. Hope everything's going well for all y'all. Hope you and yours are doing Good. First video of 2023 went live this morning, and I got quite a response to it. I've had several questions about this process, and in trying to get everything recorded, I knew this was going to be a long video, um, so I decided to split it up into two parts. I'm kind of regretting saying two parts now because it could probably go three, but I'm going to try to avoid that. I'm about 2/3 through videoing the next installment in this mini series, and I've had to do some seriously heavy editing to keep it from becoming a 1 hour epic video. So we'll see how that works out. I'm really trying hard. But I have several comments and questions that I wrote down on the video that went live this morning. And a couple of them, I'm going to go ahead and address them first. Um, and one of them was when it came to mounting and you can still see it sitting right there, when it came to mounting that slab on the onto the spoil board, I mentioned the use of composite nails and screws. And I really honestly thought I had said something about this when I recorded that video. But then that portion of the video, but then when I got into editing, I noticed I forgot. And by then it was too late to go back and talk about it because I had already surfaced the ding dong slab. So, and that is when it comes time to mount the material you're going to be surfacing on the spoil board, you have to be careful of a couple of things. The primary reason that I surfaced it this side was to try to machine out that cup. And if you just screw it down at the corners, you're basically flattening that cup out of the material, and you go ahead and run your bit over it, and then the minute you take those screws out, that cup comes right back. So what you have to do if you're going to mount with screws or composite nails or any kind of downward pressure, be it clamps or anything else, is get the material on the table and shim it, then drill through those shims and fasten that way. That way you're not pulling the cup out to fasten it and then bringing that cup right back the minute you take those screws out. And the whole point of the countersinking and counterboring is to bring the head of that screw way down into that material so that you can surface above it without surfacing deep enough to hit those screw heads. And that works if you have a lot of scrap area on the ends, and it works just fine. Just make sure to tuck those shims under there, get everything nice and stable, then drill through and screw down through those shims. And it's the same with composite nails. Uh, you don't want to pull that flat only to have it come right back the minute you take it off of the spoil board. Let's see. So that's that one there. The next was, believe it or not, I had this 2 or 3 times. Why do I surface along the Y versus just, in the case of that slab there, mount it sideways and go along the X? I can't speak for everybody, but for me, it's mainly for video purposes. You can see that slab back there on the corner. Yeah, it's about 17 inches wide. It's right around, I think it's right around 700 and no, that's 400 and something millimeters. But you see how big that dust shoe is right over my shoulder here. If I can get out of my own way. There we go. If I mount that sideways and start running that back and forth along the X, all you'll see is a brush going back and forth in the video. You won't be able to actually see any progress in the machining of the material. So it's strictly for aesthetics as far as the video is concerned. By running it with the Y, you can at least see that brush move over as it machines away that top surface. And when it comes to surfacing materials, I have to use dust collection. It's a must, and that's not negotiable. Uh, that that Amana surfacing bit has a 2-inch diameter, and it will sling chips all over this place. And I just don't feel like cleaning up that much of my shop all at once with the vacuum cleaner. So, no, dust collection is a must. And the way that boot is set up, the edge of that bit will be probably about an inch and a half away from the brush in X, but about 3.5 to 4 inches away from the brush in Y. So that brush will just cover more of the material as it's going back and forth in X than it will if I do it in the Y. So that's why I surface in the Y, is basically for video. It doesn't really matter. You can do it from any direction. That's just how I did mine. So let's see. Somebody brought up the witness marks on the surface of the slab after I got done finishing it, or surfacing it rather. And the marks, what we mean by witness marks is you can see as the bit goes top to bottom or even from side to side, you see stripes. And it can be misleading. It can look like it's leaving ridges in between each color of those stripes. What that actually is that is the bit uh, going in this direction and then moving over and then coming back in this direction. So as it's going, making its first pass, it's cutting the fibers off clockwise. But as it comes back down, it's actually, well, the bit is still turning clockwise, but the fibers are being cut in a different direction, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of like when you mow your lawn. When you push the mower away, this direction, then turn around and come back this way, you have different colored stripes when you get finished mowing your lawn. Even though it's all the same height and the same thickness, it was just cut in a different direction. So that's what you're seeing on the surface of that material. It's nice and smooth. And I think yes, I did show in the video that I laid that straight edge all the way across the whole length of that slab after I get done surfacing it, and it's nice and flat. Yeah, Michael Mazalik uh, brings up a good one. If you look at the grass pattern on a baseball field or football field, it's just the path of the travel. Yes. There you go. Catching Kings, the path of travel. Exactly. So it is nice and flat. There are no ridges in it or anything else. And if you do have ridges, then you need to check in to the tramming of your spindle or your fastening method and make sure that you have that piece nice and flat. Well, no, if you've got ridges, you need to tram your router slash spindle. So that was what that was all about. Another one is, can you do this in like G code sender or universal G code sender or UCCNC or WinCNC? Pick your own software. The answer is you should be. Um, I have only used Mach 3 and Mach 4. I've never used any other control software. What I would suggest is getting into that control software support community. Now, I know there are Universal G-Code Sender Facebook groups. I know there are forums that are dedicated to this because, believe me, you are not the first person to have that question. And I would highly, highly, highly recommend to everybody that no matter who your machine manufacturer is, go to their website and look for a link to their support community, whether be that a forum or a Facebook group or whatever. Most software publishers have a support community. I know Mach 4, Mach 3 has an excellent support community. UGS has a good support community too. And there are other sub support communities throughout on other CNC forums. But you are not the first person to ask that question. These are the people to talk to because they know your machine and they know your control software the best. Now, if you're using something like an Axiom or a Laguna that has a proprietary uh, pendant control with a built-in controller, get into their support community and ask your questions over there because I would only be guessing. And some controllers have different terminology. It's not 100% standardized. So I might lead you in the wrong direction. So excuse me. So your best bet is to talk to the support community for either the machine or the controller software you're using. But I would almost say just about every controller software has this capacity for incremental jogging or for MDI commands. And that's simply so you have better control over what your machine is doing, where, and when. Because Uh, I mean, I'm sure we all know that one size fits all usually doesn't. So I can't make a blanket statement and say, oh, yeah. Probably the single most popular comment I got was, well, I don't know why you did it this way. I'd have just drawn a rectangle bigger than the material and let the machine do it. And to those people, I think they missed the purpose of the video. The purpose of the video was less about machining that flat than it was introducing incremental jogging, MDI commands, and the reason for surfacing on a CNC router. That slab is irrelevant. Yes, I want a nice flat surface on it, and what I'm surfacing it for is completely irrelevant. What's important is knowing how to set a height using MDI or to move an axis in MDI. What's important is knowing how to move your spindle or any of the axes for that matter, a specific amount. If you want it to move 3 inches in Y, but stay in its current X position, you need to know how to get into MDI commands and type in the coordinate you want it to go to. Yes, Russell, MDI commands are in Mach 3. In fact, let me open up Mach 3 and I'll show you. I have Mach 4 loaded, but I don't have Mach 3 loaded, and I really should have that. One of these days, Russell, I will get this right. So almost like I've been doing this for a week or two. Well, that's not going to help you any. Well, it might. Okay, let me come back over here. And of course, it didn't do what I want it to do. So let's go over here and share screen, and we'll share that screen, not the one I'm watching. And this right here is the Mach 3 screen. And I'm sorry it's not a better screen capture. But if you come up here to your tabs, the first tab that it opens up in is Program Run. You go over here to MDI, and it's a different interface. Here you input your MDI commands right here in this line. And there's a little bit of a difference here. If I type in, let's say G00Z, what's my reading at? 0.0, all I now have to do is hit enter and it's going to execute that command. Okay. And well, I have to hit reset first. And okay, let's try it again. Boom. G00Z 0.0, hit enter, and it executed the command up here. So you have to be careful, because if you accidentally hit that enter, it's going. That's why in Mach 4, they have switched over to where in the MDI is now over here, you have to hit cycle start MDI. So Tony B says, doesn't MDI just mean manual data input? Exactly. You're just inputting the code manually versus running a program. Exactly. Exactly. It's, come over here and MDI. I'm already at 0. Of course, I don't have a CNC hooked up to this, so I don't know if this is going to work. We'll find out together. G00, oops, Z 0.125. I can hit enter and nothing. It just jumps down to the next line in my text block. So you could technically type in several commands. But the minute I hit cycle start MDI, it's going to start trying to move. Now, since this is not hooked up to a CNC router, this just froze up basically. So those are the major differences. So in Mach 3, it's the tabs are located up here. And in Mach 4, they're right down here in this area. So, okay. But the purpose of the video was basically to show, number one, how to do it manually. Number two, introduce the MDI commands. And there are a ton of ton of commands in G code. And virtually, I think just about all of them can be covered in the MDI. But generally speaking, MDI is used for small commands, just single things like to move the gantry out of the way, or to lift up the Z, or bring down the Z a specific amount, or something like that. So let's see here. Okay, having not watched the video yet, is this surfacing exercise different than surfacing a spoil board in that you're learning how to control your router head? Yeah. Yes, very much so. It is different. I know it sounds like a shameless plug, Tim, but go ahead and watch the video and all will be revealed. Let's see, Garen 234, can you cover why we'd want to home our CNC? I've been getting by without it so far. If you've been getting by without it so far, then fine. The main reason I home, well, It depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it. The reason it's important to home is, well, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons is, as I said in the video, home the machine because the controller needs to know where that spindle is. Give you an example. When I first got my very first three-way touch plate, I didn't have homing or limit switches. So I never bothered with homing. And on occasion, didn't do it every time, but on occasion, when I touched off on that touch plate to set my Z axis, after it touched off, it would start trying to drive that bit down through that touch plate and through the spoil board. Didn't do it all the time. And I could never figure out why it did that. And it was simply because when I turned on the machine and started up the Mach 3, Mach 3 had no idea where it was. And if it thinks that the current spindle position is somewhere way above the home position, and you touch off on that touch plate, it's going to head for home. It's going to retract to that home position. Well, if it thinks that home position is somewhere down here, that's where it's trying to go. So the controller needs to know where that spindle is. Now in Mach 3, this was real easy. All I had to remember to do, and it was part of my checklist, was fire up the machine. I had no homing or limit switches. So I would just bring the spindle up to within about an inch of the top of its travel, and then click on Ref All Home in the Mach 3 screen. That set the home position in machine coordinates to where after it touched off, that's where it went. So it never again did I have the problem of it trying to plunge through the spoil board. The spindle, the controller just needs to know where that spindle is. Not only that, you have repeatability. For instance, if I don't home my machine and I put a piece of material down and I'm carving away, having a good old time, and the power goes out, I have to guess and come back to where I was and hopefully get the right X, Y, and Z. But if I have homed my machine before I start that carve and I know where that position is, that's one of the reasons why I drilled those holes down the side of the spoil board and set up a work offset. I can now fire everything back up as soon as the power comes on, home the machine, go back to that work offset, and it's ready. I'm not searching for where XY0 was and trying to pick up where I left off. It's just right there. So Norman Peterson says, for us poor people with something like carbide motion, moving the spindle by manually moving X and Y with the arrow keys works fine. It works fine for me too, Norman. The only thing is I'm showing how to move it in a precise amount. So if I need to move it, if I want to move my spindle down a 1/16 of an inch, I can move it down a 1/16 of an inch. So Richard Canton says, I don't understand why you need MDI. Every time I turn my machine on, it asks home all. Home is extreme lower left corner. Okay, I think you're misunderstanding. MDI has nothing to do with homing. It has nothing to do with homing. MDI is how you can move an axis precisely and just with just a couple of commands. It has nothing to do with homing. Now, you do have to have an XYZ0 if you plan on doing it. Now, I did not set an XY0 when I surfaced this slab. That's why, and I did that on purpose. I used incremental jogging to move over 1 inch every time I made a pass. Conversely, what I could have done was type G00X 1.0 and then just kept hitting cycle start MDI. But I decided I wanted to show the incremental jogging, so I did it that way instead. MDI is just a way for you to move your axis a known amount at any point. It has nothing to do with homing. And I'm I always home. My Z is heavy and creeps down when all turned off. Yeah, I've heard of that as well. Some folks with a heavy router or spindle, and it'll kind of wind its way down a little bit if it's been sitting for quite a while. So, let's see. Steve Extreme Woodworker says, came in late, so you may have mentioned it already. Does MDI use absolute or work coordinates? It can use either one. It can use either one. If you put it into work coordinates and you give it an MDI command, it'll work in those coordinates. If you put it into machine coordinates and you give it an MDI command, it'll use those coordinates. So it's very rare. Well, it depends on what you're doing. Some people live in machine coordinates. Other people very rarely even turn on that screen and don't know how to find it. But yeah, it depends on your, well, here IL says it depends on your controller state and what you're in. So Richard Canton says, okay, I guess the HHC is my MDI. Okay, I don't know what HHC is, as I don't use, I'm not, I don't know which software you're using. And that's something else. And maybe it's just me. I don't understand all the resistance to homing the machine. You're not opposed to turning it on. You're not opposed to putting a bit in the collet. You're not opposed to tightening it up with the wrench. Why is there so much resistance to click one button? I don't get it. I really don't understand. Well, you don't need to home your machine. Well, you don't need to turn on the router either. It works better when you do. Okay, handheld controller. All right. See, I don't have one on this system, so I really don't have all that uh, much experience with anything else. HHC handheld controller. Onefinity has an Xbox controller, so we don't have to enter commands for movements. Okay, yeah, and I use an Xbox 360 controller and my keyboard, so I don't have to enter commands either. I'm showing you the option. You know, this is my entire channel is like a buffet. Pick and choose what you want out of it and enjoy it, and leave the rest for somebody else behind you. If you have a system that works for you, fine and dandy. Far be it from me to say you're doing it wrong. I don't do that. Um, so if and especially when you have a proprietary controller like the Laguna, like the Axiom, something like that, then by all means, and please do follow their commands, because as I said before, not all of it is standardized. I mean, people have different terms for different things. G code is standardized, machine code is standardized, but that's about it. So MDI is relative to the current position regardless of coordinates. I believe so. I know it is in when you're in work coordinates. I know it's no. it's relative when you're in work coordinates, it's relative to the Z0 position you have set. So I have to have set that Z0 position somewhere. And then if I tell it to go to Z positive 1 inch, it's going to go from that Z0, not its current position. It's going to go from that Z0 position. So let's see. John Thompson says, I think it's all up to how much depth you want to get into in using your software and controller options. Yes, that's 100% true. You can go your entire life without knowing a single line of G code. I'm just throwing the options out there. Now, the next video, what I'm going to do is get into Aspire and draw up vectors. I'm going to do it two different ways. I'm going to machine a little bit from the material surface, and then I'm going to machine it down to a specific thickness, setting my Z0 position from the machine bed. So you'll see both ways of doing it. That's kind of why I'm debating on whether or not I want to split this up. I don't want to. I want to try to put it out as one video, but we'll see. But it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like driving a dump truck. You learn to drive before you learn to operate the truck. You know what I mean? Or it's like trying to drive anything that's overly complicated. You got to know how to drive first. This is the steering wheel. This is the brake. This is the shifter. You need to know those basics before you can get into raising blades or all the other good stuff. And that's exactly what this was. So, let's see here. One of the nice features of the HHC is a button for locking the X or another for locking Y. Makes it easy to mill straight rabbets, dados quickly using the joystick and not wandering off the line. Yeah. I tend to use my, when I'm in situations like that, I'll use the keyboard control button. So, Russell Faraday says it's a bit like people can drive a car with no clue how the internal combustion works. Yes. And I'm just getting started in G code myself. That's why I don't, uh, I don't presume to tell people what works and what doesn't work in MDI commands or in G code. Is because I'm just getting into it myself. You know, I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. There are people in this chat right now that can run circles around me in G code. So, yeah. Let's see here. And believe it or not, I used to really think that this was just overcomplicating a process that didn't need to be this complex. Well, as I'm getting further and further into this, I'm finding that it's just the opposite. Where before I had 5 or 6 steps before I could hit cycle start G code, now I have 2. I mean, when I think about it, what I was trying to do, what I was doing before, even though I had the 3-way touch plate, I would mount a piece of stock on the CNC and then cut it out, get my project done, take it up, and then mount the next piece down and take my 3-way touch plate, find the X, Y, and Z0 for that bit and go. And then a couple days, come back. Well, thinking that setting up work offsets was just overcomplicating things when I was overcomplicating things. With this work offset, I can now just put it there. I don't have to set my XY0. It's already set. All I have to set is my Z0. That's it. So I was overcomplicating things by not digging into it. So all I'm trying to do is kind of, number one, take away the mystery because none of this is rocket science. It can lead to rocket science. And also to let you know not to be afraid, that there are tabs and there are commands that you can use here, and you are in charge, you are in control. And if you just want to move your spindle over 6 inches, you can move your spindle over 6 inches, but it'll stay in the same Y position at the same Z height. So that's all. Let's see. Uh, Absolutely, Bob. There is more than one way to skim a board. And if you have a particular position, a particular method, and a particular technique that works for you, don't change it. We tend to get hung up on the best when sometimes there just is no best. I tell people the best of anything is the one that you can afford, that does what you want it to do safely, and you end up liking it. Then that's the best, because your idea of success is different from mine. Your idea of perfection is different from mine. Your idea of what looks good is different from mine. If you're perfectly happy running something at 100 inches per minute, then why change it? Just because somebody else can run it at 200 inches per minute. You don't know their setup, you don't know their machine, you don't know their controller system, you don't know their material. So why change it? So Peter Van Vliet, is there a way to save a VCarve Pro preview into a 3D file format, not just a bitmap? No. VCarve Pro is not a 3D modeling software. That's an Aspire function. You can do that with Aspire, but you cannot do that with VCarve Pro. So let's see here. Colorado Woodworking says, I use presets all the time. Why I believe people use XY probes too much. They have their place. I'm not either for them or against them. When I used my Gatton CNC, I used a triple edge finder, 3-way touch plates, and I loved it. It served its purpose. Uh, my Avid came with a 3-way touch plate, an XY probe, and I still use it on occasion, but not nearly as often as I used to use it. I don't use it on every project. If the project will physically fit in my uh, work location, my preset work offset, if it'll physically fit there, I use that because the guesswork is done. The power can go out and in the middle of a carve, and I can come back, home the machine, tell it to go to that work offset, and then all it is tracking down which line number I was on when the power went out. But it really saves time, believe me. Let's see here. Mm. Steve Extreme Woodworker says, every day I am reminded of how much I do not know. Oh boy, do I hear you. Um, Sometimes I'm amazed that I don't even know how much I don't know yet, you know, but uh, forever learning, forever learning. And not just CNC, everything. So, and if you're not learning, start learning. Somebody's going to get hurt. Okay, Garen wants to know, how do you pick a ramp length? Okay, when you're talking about something like ramping in a plunge move for a pocket or a profile, generally speaking, what I do is, depending upon the bit, if the bit does have a cutter all the way across the bottom, let's say a 1/4 inch up cutter, down cut end mill, it's got a cutter all the way across the bottom. It was designed, it can plunge in. I will ramp that in usually 2 times its cutting diameter. So 1/2 inch would be my ramp length. If it doesn't have a cutter all the way across the bottom, for instance, my surfacing bit, it's got its 3 wings with carbide inserts. There is no cutter in the middle. I can't plunge that straight down and start cutting. It needs to ramp in. I will go 3 times the cutting diameter so that by the time that back edge of the cut starts to engage material, it's already been cleared away by the front edge of that cut. So in the case of this 2-inch cutter, that would be a 6-inch ramp. Spoiler alert for the next video, that's why when I'm surfacing with that bit, I make the vector 2 inches deeper or longer than the material on the far end. Okay, here we go. Tony B says the 3 times is the rule of thumb for ramping. Yeah, that's if there's no cutter across the bottom, that's what I use is 3 times. If there is a cutter on the bottom, like a 1/4-inch end mill or an 1/8-inch end mill, and I'm just ramping to kind of ease my way into it so I don't have that little dimple where the plunge happens. Sometimes I'll go 2, sometimes I'll go 3. It depends on the bit, I'm also finding too. But let's see. Let's see. Had a bit loosen in the collet and grind too deep. First time this has happened to me. I presume I'm not alone. I had it happen once. And it was an experiment. Some of you have heard of a muscle chuck. I was still using my Porter Cable 890 series router on the Gatton CNC. And a couple of people had said, oh, I use a muscle chuck and it makes tool changes so much easier. And oh, I like it. Oh, I like it. So I got one and I tried it. And I tightened that sucker down. And the very first time I used a downcut spiral bit, the downward pressure of that bit was just enough that it pulled that bit out of the collet by about 1/8 of an inch. And so when it picked up to move to the next position, it drug right across the center of that project. And that was it. The muscle chuck came off of the Gatton CNC and never went back on it. It's on my router table. It's great for the router table. It makes changing bits on the router table real easy. But it has, to me, I did not want that on my CNC. So that's the only time I've ever had that happen. See, Mike Mazalik says that happened to him. The collet was worn out so that it couldn't hold the bit. Collets do wear out. Yes, they do. They also need to be cleaned. When I'm finished using it for the day, whatever bit is in the CNC router, I pull the collet completely out of the spindle, take the bit out of the spindle, the bit goes back in its case, the collet gets blown out. About every third use, the collet gets blown out with compressed air. About every third use, I will clean it up with isopropyl alcohol. And that will get rid of any, of the resins or pitch coming from any woods that it may have encountered. But just plain old isopropyl alcohol, and take a Q-tip and dip it in isopropyl alcohol and clean out the taper on the spindle while I'm doing the collet. And then just blow them both off with the air hose. And do that before you fire it up, because alcohol is extremely flammable. Also, don't forget to clean your bits. And I used to use VM&P naphtha to clean my bits. Now I use isopropyl alcohol because it's cheap. I mean, and I'm talking about, well, now I can't grab it. I got stuff in the way. Well, maybe I can grab it here. Yep, there we go. As I fall over. 91% isopropyl alcohol. That's about $3-4, something like that. It's a lot cheaper than any other cleaning solvent I have found, and it works very, very well. It's an excellent grease cutter. So let's see here. Steve Russell says his was sawdust and chips packed into the collet. Yes. Got to keep that blown out. I made the mistake once in a router table, and that was went home for the weekend. This is back at the cabinet shop. I went home for the weekend, and I had left a bit in the router table that I used. I used this particular router table. We had router tables all over the cabinet shop. I used this particular router table to cut rabbets for in the ends of drawer box sides. And I went home for the weekend. I left the bit in the router, then came back, and I came back that following Monday, and the guy who sharpened our bits and saw blades came in and was looking to pick up stuff. My boss says, go ahead and pull that bit out of your router table over there and give it to him and swap out the bit. You should have seen me try to get that bit out of that router because it had sat there and almost solidified, basically. We don't realize what comes out of wood when we cut it and chop it. And I had a heck of a time getting that bit out of that collet. Well, that the collet came out of the router just fine. Thankfully, we had another collet that I could get back to work with. But I mean, to the point of taking a small piece of brass rod and tapping it out from the back to get it broke loose for me to pull it out. So I learned my lesson. Take the bit out of the collet as soon as I'm done with it every day. C, do you ever use bearing guided bits on the CNC where it's just an overarm router, i.e. no movement other than the setup? No. And you move your workpiece by hand against the bearing? No, I use a router table. I use a router table for things like that. Now, I've got nothing against it. I've just never done it. And I know people who have used bits that come with a guide bearing, and they just take that guide bearing off. And you have to provide clearance for that little nub that sticks out of the bottom of the bit where that guide bearing used to be. I haven't done it yet. Not saying I won't, just saying that I haven't done it yet. So, Jack in the shop. I have an old router. I call it my roundover router because I can't get that bit out. You too, huh? I'm not quite to that point, but I'm, you know. Let's see. Paul Clutter says there's acid in wood also. Yes, there is. And you'd be amazed at what some of the tannins in some woods will do to metal. Let's see. CMT 2050 will take all the cred off and it works like no one's biz. I think you'd be surprised at what 91% isopropyl alcohol will do. And I mean, like I said, this is a quart. That's like $3, $4, $5. So, Tim Belt, what about using keyhole bits on a CNC for making mounting slots? I have a video on my channel on how to put the keyhole bit into the tool database and use it. and I use it quite regularly. I will put a link to that video in the description of this video just as soon as we're finished live here. Yeah, you can put a keyhole bit into your tool database and use it very simply. Okay, let's see here. Okay, that is next up on my watch list. Tell you what you do. If you go to my YouTube channel and you scroll back to my first couple CNC router videos, and then you start there with number 1 and you go all the way to the end, you will never get anything done. I have 400 videos on this channel. Nobody, nobody you'd want to talk to. Nobody knows every video, not even me. I have to go back and watch my videos just because do something one time and then come back and try to remember what you did a year later. Huh? So, yes, the keyhole gadget does work great, but the thing about the way I did it, putting it into the tool database, is, for instance, Cut 2D Desktop and VCarve Desktop does not have gadget support. You cannot use gadgets. So having the ability to go in and draw a vector and assign that to making a keyhole is very, very convenient. And it opens it up to everybody. I'm not saying don't use the gadget. The gadget works great, but not everybody can use gadgets. Okay, let's see here. We have 2 more. Paul Clutter says, Mark, how thick of a piece of wood can you cut on your machine? I think my Z capacity is 7.5 inches. I may be wrong. Now they also have a 12-inch Z axis. I don't need that. I just don't need it. That's overkill. So for me, the better bet was to go to just the standard Z axis, and I believe it's 7.5 inches. I'll have to look, but I'm not really sure. So let's see. Yeah, yeah. Russell Faraday says, watch all my vids. That'll save you a fortune because you won't have time to get a CNC. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I'm with you, Jack. I'm with you. You would be amazed at how many times I refer to my old videos because I can't remember what I did. So yeah. Well, we have somebody here dropping in that I haven't seen in a while, not on YouTube anyway, Mr. Bull Shanigan. And that dovetails into the last question I'm going to ask or answer today. And that was from Wade Custance. He says, can you tell everyone that Bull needs just a few hundred more members on the Make, and he will have 5,000 members and will give away a free truck model. Now, I don't know if this, if my conspiratorial mind should go into overtime or not, Bull, but since you showed up, this is my buddy Bull Shanigan, runs a very tidy Keebler tree over on Facebook. It's a group called The Make. And Bull is kind of a behind the scenes cheerleader, but he's stepping out from behind the curtain, much like the Wizard of Oz here lately. And he's been running a little community challenge, as he puts it. His Facebook group called The Make is currently sitting just a bit under 5,000 members. So for those of you who are on Facebook, I know not everybody is, There's a link right there in the chat to that group. If you will head on over there and become a member of the Make and take a little explore, see what's been going on behind the curtain. Some very, very, very cool projects happening over there. We have some very good people who are active members over there, tool suppliers, tool makers, just all kinds of real good, decent people who are very, very community oriented. And if you stop over there and join, tell them Mark sent you. And it's as he says, Bull made a very cool project. He cut out, now check it out. He cut out the front grille, both sides, the bottom, and the top of an old Ford pickup. Like a, what was it, Bull? About a 49, 50 Ford F1. And then he put all those pieces together and he has a model truck that he painted a flame job on, painted it red and everything. Very cool. I think that's the model you're going to give away. Is that right there, Bull? When he gets to 5,000 members of that Facebook group. Go check it out. Bull is a great guy. He offers one-on-one tutorial sessions. He's a good guy with a heart as big as Texas. And just let him know that Mark sent you. He won't hold that against you. He'll let you join. Uh, but do check out the group rules. There aren't many. Just, don't be a jerk, basically. So, I mean, sometimes I don't trust a group that'll let me be a member, but in this case, I do. They're good people. All right. I also wanted to give a shout out to my website sponsor, Steve Nealon over at Harneal Media. He's here every week. He is my moderator. He is just, I'm very proud to call him a friend. He is excellent at what he does. If you're thinking about a website, if you want to create or increase your web presence, Steve is your guy. And when you talk with Steve, you're talking with Steve. You're not talking to some faceless, nameless entity in some call center somewhere. You're dealing with Steve. Uh, I 100% endorse him and very proud to call him a friend. Harneal Media, Harneal. And he is the sponsor of Mark Lindsay CNC.com. I want to also give a special shout out to all of my channel members. You see them here, guys like Steve Russell and Tim Belt and Richard French and many others. You see the little symbol next to their name there. That's letting you all know that they are channel members. Got some very interesting things to talk about on the members only live stream tomorrow. Thanks to Tim Belt. He threw out a good question. I'm going to try to answer it and maybe we can help each other out. Members only live stream tomorrow, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. For everybody else, next week will be a open Q&A. You can ask me any question you'd like about this video, any of my previous videos. I hope I got to everybody's question. It was kind of an all over the place episode today. So members, I'll see you tomorrow night and thank you very much. Everybody else, see you next Sunday. I think that's it. Oh yes, I'll get the keyhole bit and I'll put a link to the make in the description of this video as soon as we're done here. And go out and do something cool. Get out in the shop. We got a little bit of time left. If that finish is dry, you can start another project. Get out of here. Have a good day. Take care, y'all. See you next week.